Welcome once again. This is Pinnacle Professional College, and today I bring you another lecture. In our last lecture, we looked into environmental analysis. We've talked about the PESTEL framework, and we've also talked about Porter's diamond. We explained exactly what the diamond looks like and what was going through Michael Porter's mind as he sought to challenge the traditional theory on national competitiveness. Now, we are going to talk about the role of government in creating competitive advantage. What's the role of government in creating competitive advantage? Now, Porter has argued that the four elements in the diamond, which we've discussed in our prior video, I wouldn't want to go much into that, are all important for creating national competitive advantage. Because what is that? What those four factors do is that it creates the right circumstances that result in competitive advantage. So, number one, the skill sets of the country is very, very important. The resources and the skills in the country is very, very important. In this day and age of technology, we cannot override information. Information is key. Information will determine how the skills are harnessed and how the resources are invested, which is very, very crucial. We also need to understand the goals of individuals and companies and the pressure, the constant pressure on companies to innovate, to be on the cutting edge of business in the 21st century. You need to innovate. You need to innovate. So that's the role. The role for the government is that they create a very, very good environment where companies are able to innovate and invest. They should participate in the training and upscaling of resources, and they should help, they should help companies within that country thrive and survive in a changing environment. Now, government can help create suitable conditions. So we talked about some of the conditions earlier, but let's look at it. We first talked about upskilling, right? Upskilling is basically training. So they can create an education and training system that develops appropriate labor skills and knowledge. Very, very important. Very, very key. They can also help to raise their performance levels by enforcing strict product standards. And because the whole idea is to serve a customer, and the product that's being sold to the customer must be of good quality. So government can help by ensuring that performance levels are very, very high. They can create early demand for new and advanced products by purchasing the products themselves. So governments could also be customers, right? So, for example, if in a country there's a car manufacturer, a popular car manufacturer who produces, who produces cars, right? The government police department can buy some of those cars to use for their policing or going around to perform their duties. So government itself can be a customer and they can support companies in that country in that regard. They can also stimulate a healthy competition. Let me use the expression healthy competition, because if the rivalry is unhealthy, that would be counterproductive. So they can stimulate rivalry between local firms by enforcing strict antitrust regulations or legislation. So there are a lot of examples in this regard. Let's look at Japan, for instance. Japan is really, really good when it comes to electronics, electrical. So Japan is into mobile technology. An example that has been used to illustrate Porter's diamond theory is the success of Japanese companies, right? Japanese companies are very, very successful, and it's due to the fact that the customers in Japan were very sophisticated. And when your customers are sophisticated, they are always giving you feedback, right? They are always giving you feedback, and they are giving you high demands to operate by, right? There's always something something that they are looking for, and you always need to meet those requirements. So in Japan, the customers were sophisticated, and once customers are sophisticated, they require more from you, and they put pressure on you to innovate, and they put pressure on you to be competitive in what you are providing. Japan also had a relatively large number of electrical engineers, providing a source for skilled labor. So you have customers being sophisticated, you have skilled labor, and then you also have strong related and supporting industries. Strong, related, and supporting industry. So this is also another arm of the Porter's diamond, right? Japan also had this related industries or supporting industries, and that helped boost the technology or drive the technology sector. The next one is strong local rivalry. Strong local rivalry. So because there was huge and fierce competition, which was obviously healthy between producers, it helps stimulate innovation. It helps stimulate innovation. And also the last point would be that there was strong government support. Strong government support, which is key in order to have national competitive advantage. There are some weaknesses. Let's move on to criticisms. There are some weaknesses in Porter's diamond theory, right? And some of the criticisms are, it seems more relevant to companies in advanced economies or in advanced countries compared to those in developing countries. It is more relevant to companies in advanced economies, economies, than to companies in developing economies. Right. So this theory has a certain bias because it seems more tilted to advanced countries compared to developing countries. It's very, very important. Very, very important because, for example, it's only in an advanced country where you would see a hub or a cluster of related and supporting industries, like what you see in Silicon Valley. If you go to a developing country, you would not see that. It can be very, very hard to find. So this relates more to advanced economies compared to developing economies. The diamond model does not consider the role of the multinational company, which locates production operations in different countries. So another criticism of the diamond model, which is Porter's theory, it does not consider multinational companies that have operations worldwide. How do they come into play in terms of producing national competitive advantage? So these are two strong weaknesses, even though the model proves to be very, very useful. These are two criticisms. So in your examination, you might be required to use Porter's diamond theory to explain the global success of companies. You might be required to do this, right? So you should understand it. You should know what it means. You should be able to explain it and apply it. So again, these are the different points or different factors when it comes to Porter's diamond theory. Number one is favorable inputs, which is favorable factor conditions. Number two is related and supporting industries. Number three is demand conditions. And number four is firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, right? It's very, very important. Very, very important. So there's an acronym I use. I call it FRFD. 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 The first F would be firm favorable factor conditions or favorable factor conditions. Favorable factor conditions, and that's the first point. You see that here. The second letter, which is R, would be related and supporting industries. Related and supporting industries. So that's FR. Then FD, the other F would represent firm, strategy, structure, and rivalry. Firm, strategy, structure, and rivalry. And the D, obviously, is demand conditions in the home market. So this is something maybe you can adopt and use if that's helpful to you. That's fine. So in terms of the chapter review, we've talked about pestle analysis, and we've talked about Porter's diamond. Now let's move on to chapter 3 of the text and try to understand what is going on here. So we'll be moving on to competitive forces. Competitive forces. I'll introduce this a little bit and I'll go deeper into it in subsequent lectures. Here we'll be talking about competition and markets. We'll be talking about industry competition, the 5 forces model. We'll be talking about the life cycle model. We'll be talking about the BCG matrix. We'll be looking into opportunities and threats. So let's dive in and see what we have here. I expect you to understand the exam content and to understand exactly what the examiner requires in this area. I can do a separate video on that, but for now, let's dive straight into it. Now let's talk about competition and markets. Competition and market. So what is a market? When we say a market, what exactly is a market? A market is simply a place where buying and selling takes place. Right? So a market is simply a place where buying and selling takes place between sellers and buyers, or buyers and customers. It is just a place where buying and selling takes place. So someone is selling something, someone wants to buy. A market can be defined in different ways. Number one, it can be defined by the products or services. It can be defined by the customers. And it could also be defined by the geographical area. So market can be defined in different ways, different ways. Number one, what did we say? It can be defined by the product. Number two, it can be defined by the customers. And number three, it can be defined by the geographical area. And that's why you have some markets to be global and some defined markets to be local. So who is a customer? A customer is simply the person who buys the good or the service, the person who buys the good or the service. And the consumer is the person that uses the good or the service that has been bought. Right? So this is a slight distinction between a customer and a consumer. I mean, they are used interchangeably, but it's a slight difference. So a customer buys the product. So let's say I walk into a store and I go and buy chocolates, right? Once I buy the chocolates, I'm a customer, right? But I do not necessarily have to eat that chocolate. If I hand it over to another person, that person then and the person eats it, then that person becomes a consumer. So a slight distinction. So a customer is the person that purchases a good or buys a good. A consumer is the person that uses the good that has been bought. So subsequently, as we already know by now, customers and consumers are not necessarily the same person. So an example here, right? They give an example. Someone who buys an ice cream to eat themselves is both the customer and the consumer. So if I buy it and I eat it, I'm the customer and the consumer. However, when a parent buys an ice cream for their child, the parent becomes the customer, whereas the child becomes the consumer. Very, very important distinction, something to keep at the back of your mind. An important aspect of business strategy for companies is concerned with selling goods or services to targeted markets. These strategies are product market strategies. A similar concept of markets and customers can be applied to the provision of public services. So basically, what we are talking about here is business strategies that are designed for certain particular or certain territories or certain markets or certain targeted markets, right? So we already talked about markets being defined by customers, being defined by products, and being defined by regions. Industries and sectors. An industry is basically a group of companies, right, who produce similar goods and services. Basically, a group of companies, or an industry is basically a group of companies who produce similar goods and services. So it says here, an industry consists of companies which produce similar goods and services. For example, there's an aerospace industry, there's a telecommunications industry, there's a hospitality industry, there's a finance industry, there's a construction industry, and so on and so forth. So a construction industry would have, companies that are into the same construction business. However, within an industry, don't forget that there might be segments. So an industry segment is a separate part of the overall larger industry. So for example, if you take let's say the electronic industry, right, or electricals, you can have the sale of electrical appliances, and you can have the sale or manufacture of the parts. These are segments, right? So in the same vein, you can also have the automobile industry, which is divided into the manufacture of automobiles and the manufacture of parts, right? The insurance industry too would have similar thing. The insurance industry will have general insurance, life assurance, pensions, etc. The finance industry will also have the same, right? The finance industry would have, let's say we'll have banking, would have insurance, you would have other sectors in finance, maybe risk, etc. All of which are segments of that industry. Companies need to make strategic decisions about the industry and the segment they intend to operate in, and the market or markets in which they sell their goods or services. So for a company, they need to make a strategy. Which industry do we want to operate in, and which market do we want to sell to? A distinction should be made between products and markets. They are not the same. Products and markets are not the same. So companies in different industries might sell their goods or services to the same market, right? So there are two companies who are in different industries, right, who may sell their goods or services to the same market. So, for example, there are people who manufacture washing machines, right? And there are also people who provide laundry services. These people are competing for the same person or the same market, right? The one who is manufacturing the washing machine wants to get you, the customer, to buy the washing machine and then use it. The one who also has a laundry service is also trying to also get you to bring your clothes to them to wash. So different industries, same markets. Companies in the same industry might not compete because they operate in different markets. But there's also another situation where two companies might be in the same industry, but they are focused on different markets. right? So always think about this in terms of industry markets, industry markets, industry markets. For example, a ferry company operating passenger services between the UK and France is in the same industry as a ferry company operating passenger services between the Greek island or the ferry operators on the Volta Lake, but they operate in different markets. Now, let me give a much simpler example. A much simpler example would be two bus companies, right, who are in the transportation industry, right? They provide transportation services. Two bus companies, but one is from, let's say, Accra to Kumasi, right? That's their routes, the routes they use. And the other is from Cape Coast to the Volta region, right? Even though they are in the same transportation industry, because they focus on different routes, they do not compete in that regard. In the same way, a bus company from Lagos to let's say Abidjan, right? Another bus company from let's say Accra to Burkina Faso, right? These two bus companies have taken different routes, even though they are in the same transportation industry. They are serving different markets, In the analysis of strategic position, management needs to recognize which industries and segments they operate in, which we've already talked about. Right? This is very, very important. What are the generic types of industries? So let's look at types of industries. Number one, they are fragmented industries. Number two, they are emerging industries. Number three, they are mature industries. Four, they are declining industries. Then five, they are global industries. Very, very important. So what's a fragmented industry? As the name suggests, it means in this fragmented industry, firms are small and sell to a small portion of the total market, right? So this is just a small segment. Firms in this industry are very small and they only sell to a small portion of the market. An example would be shoe repairs. This is a fragmented market. Firms are very, very little here and they sell to a small portion of the total market. Then you have the emerging industries. These are developing industries. These are industries that are developing and are likely to become much bigger and more significant in the future. They have mature industries. These are industries where products have reached the mature phase of their life cycle, right? So these are mature industries. Industries that are, these industries that are well developed. They are not just they are not emerging. These are well developed industries. They have reached the mature phase of their life cycle. An example will be the soft drinks manufacturing industry, right? They are mature industries. Then you have declining industries. These are industries that are on the downside. They are falling. They are declining. There are many examples like that. So a typical example would be the coal mining industry. It's on the decline. Global industries, right? These are industries that operate on a global scale. So the football industry, the professional football industry, it's a typical example. Now let's talk about convergence. Occasionally, there will be two or more industry or industrial segments converging and become one industry with the same customer market, right? So convergence is basically where two or more industries or industrial segments merge and become part of the same industry and serve the same customers. So that's a convergence. Now, the most important thing to know about convergence is when there's a convergence, it impacts business strategy. It impacts the strategy of the organization. Now, let's look at a few things here. Let's look at demand-led and supply-led convergence. There are two kinds of convergence. There's demand-led and supply-led convergence. So convergence can be either demand-led or supply-led. So what's demand-led? Now, anytime you hear demand, right, you know buying. Demand is buying. So this demand-led convergence is driven by customers. The pressure for industry convergence comes from customers. This is where customers begin to think of two products as interchangeable. So with demand-led convergence, it's driven by customers. With supply-led convergence, guess where it will come from? Supply-led convergence will come from sellers or suppliers. With supply-led convergence, suppliers see a link between different industries, right? So it's driven by suppliers or sellers and decides to bridge the gap between the industries. The convergence of the entertainment, data communication industries, voice communication industry is most likely or probably supply-led, right? So you have two types of convergence. You have number one, demand-led, which is driven by customers, and supply-led, which is driven by sellers. Now, let's dive into industry competition. I would explain this section overview, and then in our next lecture, we'll talk in detail about the 5 forces model. So in this section, we'll be talking about the competition analysis. We'll be talking about 5 forces. And these 5 forces, competitive forces, are basically threat from potential entrants, threat from substitute products, bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of customers, competitive rivalry. There are 5 of them, right? And then we'll summarize the 5 forces model, and then we'll talk about how to apply it. Very, very important. Very, very important. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment and let me know what video you'd like to make as well. You'd like me to make as well. Thank you for watching and have a good day. Bye-bye.